In this video, I'd like to look at a React program that is going to fetch some data and then use that data to load up the options in a drop-down select. And then when the user works with the select, then to display some information. And we're going to be reading a JSON file. That JSON file is going to have an array of objects, and then some information from that array, from those objects, is going to be in the user is going to see, and then all the other properties will be on view once the user makes a choice. Okay, the code for this can be found at this URL seen here. So let's get moving. Okay, so in the HTML, in the head, I've got a title, a meta tag. I'm linking to some style sheet, and I'm connecting to React 18, React.DOM 18, and Babel. Babel, I'm using 721.2. And on the body, not much of the body at all, a div to put everything in, and a link to a script. Okay. So the style is, there's not much style here at all. And I'm going to eventually read a JSON file. So let's have a look at that. This JSON file, and then I'm going to show another one at the end. But this JSON file starts with a square bracket, which means it's an array. And then inside we have curly brackets, which means it's an array of objects. And those objects there are these key value pairs. So there are properties like book title, book author, etc. And that's all it is. It's just one array in this file, one array of objects in this file. Okay, so let's get to the JS file. All right, so it's mainly a class, and then set up a root and you're making a component. So we're going to make a root and then render that an object of that class sort of in the root. Okay, so that's almost all the code's going to be in this class, but there's that little bit at the end that actually puts it on the page and makes it worthwhile. Okay, so I have a class, I gave it a name, I started with a capital letter, I'm extending React.Component. I want to have a state, and so I am going beyond just the default constructor of React.Component. So super props gives me all the normal stuff that comes with React.Component, and then I add my individual stuff that I want, which is a state. And I should just run this page for you. Here's what it does. I have a bunch of anatomy books I got from Dover Publications, just sort of took the information, took some book covers, and then the user can change what book they're interested in and see the information. Okay, so there are three properties in my state. One is which book I am looking at. So I'm going to have an array. And so this is going to be the book that I choose to be looking at the moment, or the user chooses to be looking at the moment, is book index. And so I'm starting it off for now at 0. Books is going to be an array, and that array is going to eventually come from the JSON data file. And then is loading. So is loading is that it takes some time to read the file. I'm going to go fetch a resource. The JSON file is a resource. I'm going to go fetch it, and that can take a while. And I have to say what I'm doing while I'm reading the file, and then when I'm done reading the file. And that's what this is loading is about. It's a Boolean that tells me, am I done reading the file? Okay. I want a method for handling the user changing the drop-down select option. So that's this method here. When we make the select, we will see then it's on change, connects to this method handle change. It is called by an event. So that's this E. And we're using a fat arrow notation for this. So you see no like explicit name of the function. Fat arrow function doesn't claim the word this. So that's when we use in line 17 here, the word this is the this of the class and not the this of the method, because fat arrow functions don't claim a this. And then I'm going to change my state, change the book index property of my state to whatever was the value of the drop-down list. So event.target.value, that's the value from the drop-down list. Okay, here is another method. This is the method for sort of componentDidMount, and this is basically a place where I can read a file. So I'm going to go out and get a resource. So there's this built-in React component method that you don't have to implement, but that you can implement, and it is at least a possible place for fetching a data resource. So I'm using fetch. I'm going out to artanatomy.json. So that just the name of the file implies that it's here a sibling to the JS file. And when fetching, I can strip out just the JSON and sort of announce that it is indeed JSON, and to treat it as JSON. So I have either arrays or objects or arrays of objects or what have you, whatever was in the JSON. And then I have a second then, which takes in that data. And I decided to pick a random book to display when the page starts. Okay. And so that was based on, I'm using just the math library. Math random times the data length, and then take the floor of that. And here's a thing to note, that I'm going to use the data to set my book array. So one more time, look at the JSON. What comes out of JSON is an array, and it's going to be that array that's going to establish my books array that was in my state. But you have to be very careful with this set state stuff. Like here I am trying to get the index, and the data has come in, and the data has a length. And then I can use math random and math floor to get a random index based on that. And then down here, I am setting the state and saying that books is equal to the data that was the JSON. Is loading now is false. I'm not loading in the file anymore. And my book index is this index that I just sort of set up. If I try to like change the order of these and try to set the state first, and then instead of using data, use like this .state.books, that wouldn't work, because of the way set state works. Is it sort of just is asynchronous. It doesn't wait for this to happen before moving on to subsequent statements. And so you got to be very careful. Like I know, because I'm reading the file of, by the way, I'm fetching, I know data exists. I can't use this .state.books in this, within this set of a block of code, because it will run ahead and won't be established, and we'll just say, I don't know what you're talking about. Okay. And then here we are, we're ready to the one method we absolutely have to do in React is the render. And we're going to render two different things. We're going to render something if the resource is not finished, and we're going to render something else, the page that you see when the books. So what I'm going to do is mess up the file. So that file does not exist. I'm going to save it, and then I'm going to refresh this page. There's the loading. Okay. So that's what I sort of know under normal circumstances don't want you to see, but I just made you see it. And let me put it back. Now we're back. Okay. But that's what was happening down here. So the fetch, again, takes some time. And the render wants to know what to do while the fetch is taking its time. And that is this is loading. So if the fetch didn't, for whatever reason, didn't work, or is taking a long time, this is what we will see. Otherwise, if it's not, if it properly loads, then we have the data with which to make our drop-down list. So that is here. So instead of putting it in a div, I made this fake React fragment, which is the idea of that you want to sort of return one thing. And so it just gives you sort of a fake container for sending back one thing. I am sending back some header. I'm sending back a select. The select has a value corresponding to the state's book index, and the change event of the select gets back to that method of the class handle change. So then within, now I'm inside the open and close select, I'm setting up a block of code to loop over my books. So this.state.books.map books. So this is the class or an object of the class. State is a property. The state of the class. Books was one of the properties, which was an array, and map is a method of arrays, which effectively does a loop. Then the name here, the arguments of this map book is the element of the array. So I'm iterating. So I have a given iteration and the book, and I'm iterating over an array. So the book is the element of the array, and I is the index, is the counting starting at 0. I'm creating an option. I have an open option, I have a close option. The open option has a value, which is I. So in a drop-down list, when I'm working with an array, I like to make the value the index of the array. And React likes to have, especially if you have multiple things, then it's creating dynamically. It likes to sort of distinguish them, and so have these keys. And so sort of, it often works without it, but behind the scenes, if you look at the console, it will complain if you don't sort of do the key thing. So, and then there's an open option and a close option, and then there's the title of the book. So that created the options. There's the close of the select. Here's just a break for a new page. This is just some long comment, 2 long comments. Okay, and then there was the book cover and then some information. So that's what's coming down here. So here is the image. Its source, its src is go to the state, this.state.books, square bracket, this.state.bookIndex, and then that gives us a particular element of the array. The particular element of the array is an object, and it has a property book cover, and we're making that property of the element of the array of objects the source of the image. And then similarly, we have here the book author and the book ISBN and the book page numbers and the book price, to which we add 2 fixed to make sure it shows 2 nice decimal places for the money. And then we're just sort of ending. And React can get sort of deep in parentheses and curly brackets, so I've just sort of clearly marked the end of return, the end of else, the end of render, the end of the class, to just sort of make clear that everything that I opened, I have closed. And that's that's it. That's this page. And so we see because what we render depends on the state. If we ever change the state, this render gets recalled, and React is taking care of that. I have no, all I did here when they changed the select was I did call handle change, and handle change, all it did was change the state. But all of the visual things on the page were called automatically by React because the page depends on the state. So when the state changes, it recalls a render and remakes the page. Okay, so that is this. I want to show you one more time. The JSON here I'm reading started with an array. Now I'm going to just show you version B, I'm calling it version B. So let me close all these. I didn't put it up on the internet, this version B. But there's only one difference. I made a different JSON, and this time the JSON started with a curly bracket, so it's an object, and then I have a property of that object called books, and then that's the array. So the previous file started here with this sort of magenta square bracket, but this JSON has a different format, starting with an object, which has a property, and it's that property that is the array. So what are the corresponding changes? Nothing in the HTML, nothing in the CSS, like 2 changes in the JavaScript according to that. I did not change the state. I could change the state. I could make books an object, but I kept books an array, and then I have to realize that what I get out of JSON. Previously, what I got out of JSON was an array, but now what I get out of JSON is not an array, but I want to get an array, so I have to get the array from JSON. So I'm going to keep the state the same and everything using the state the same, but when I'm getting in my fetch, when I'm getting the information out of the file, that's where my changes must occur. So no change to my state, no change to my handle change. Here's my change in the DidMount, because that's where I'm reading my JSON, and it's different JSON. And there are 2 changes here in 32 and in 34. Let me make this, close that so I can see a little bit better. So this used to say data, because data used to be an array, but now data is not an array, but data.books is an array. So when I'm getting the random index, it's not data, but data.books.length, because data is an object, but data.books is an array. And so then data.books.length makes sense. That's the number of elements in the array. And similarly down here, when I'm getting, this is the state books. That's books from the state. And then here is the data from the JSON file. And again, the data from the JSON file now in this second version, in the B version, is an object. But data.books, that's the array. So data.books maps in this version onto books. And so this was changed and this was changed. And other than that, it works. So let me get to the HTML and show that open with the live server, the second version also. So this is the B version. We can see here, it also works. So it's just, that was a change. Okay, that's what I wanted to show you. React, in the JSON, or sorry, in the JavaScript, this wasn't different from the previous thing I showed you. This wasn't, well, I should say, I am now getting the array from the JSON file. That's different. This is not different from the previous version and the previous video, but here's the other big change is using componentDidMount to fetch the file, and then setting the state based on what I read in the file. And then a difference for here is this is loading. What we do if the resource, while the resource is being loaded, or if the resource doesn't load. So I need to have two possible renders. One, I got the resource, one if I didn't get the resource, or while I am getting the resource. Right, that's what I wanted to show you. Thank you much for your attention.